looking at user records, I'm going to switch over to the Retention Manager shell. Most of you are familiar with this. I'm going to open up user records, and I'm starting with a new install. Now, as we normally do, if I right-click and want to do something, we have to establish the scheme in which we're going to work. Some of you may or may not be aware that in Tools, Preferences, Functions, we have the ability in user records to either assign standard record series or to assign records retention rules. You notice when I picked standard record series, I did get a pop-up notice indicating that once I make this selection, from this point forward, don't switch back and forth between doing record series or retention rules. If I have time, I'll talk about one of the reasons for doing one or the other, but a record series in the vocabulary now of big buckets and little buckets are the little buckets, the more detailed descriptions of records. Our records retention rules are actually the bigger buckets that will contain the rules for retention, but have much less description. So normally the default setting is standard record series, and we'll save that selection. I'm going to add a new record. An example I always use just for nostalgia is employee expense reports. So somebody called into your office, or you have in an old retention schedule or an inventory of records, reports such as this, employee expense reports. I know many of you are doing this electronically these days, but we still may have organizations with these types of documents. We right-click, assign, view assign standard record series, and then we get a pop-up listing of all the available record series. We find the one that is most relevant for us. We actually have one, employee expense reports. Or if you've played around with our Find button, we have a Find function where you can put in some words and then search for a record series that might be applicable. I'm going to make that assignment so you can see how it's done. So even though I have said we don't switch back and forth between standard record series, the reason we don't do it is our reports would never show both assignments of standard record series or retention rules. It's got to be one or the other, or the system gets confused. So in this case, I assigned a standard record series and a period. I'm now going to show you, though, how to do it the other way for some people who have that need. And to do that, I'm going to right-click. If I try to assign a retention rule, notice it's grayed out. So nothing is going to work the way I want unless in Preferences I go back, change the preferences, and instead of standard record series, I want records retention rules. I save that, close the preferences, right-click, and the next time I want to assign, I get standard. Instead of standard record series, I get records retention rules. My pop-up shows the records retention rules. By default, we have 124 of those, and I can pick out the rule and do the assignment. So remember, you can do it either way. I know there's a raging debate out there about big buckets and little buckets. So those who follow the little buckets theory, you can assign standard record series, which is our preferred method. If you really want fewer buckets, 100 or so, you can assign the retention rules. But we also have a capability of doing the third option, which I believe is the right option, and that is to assign fewer buckets per person by setting up a departmental type schedule. So in order to do this, let me show you a new feature in Retention Manager. Some of you may be aware of this, some of you may not, but it also involves user records, and it is the function which is to import user records. We have the opportunity to be able to bring in user records from your existing retention schedule if it's in the right format. Now, what is the right format? I'm throwing up a very simple sample Excel spreadsheet. If you can get your data into a format similar to this, we can import it into your user record screen. In fact, we can also import it into your standard record series screen. Doesn't have to be in this order, but you need to identify your columns. You can use labels as the first line, and then eventually you'll delete those after the import. In this case, in the first column, I have code, department 1 name, department 2 name, the record title. We could have record title 2, record title 3, record title 4, description, and then the retention. And the retention could be whatever you had. It could be a prosy retention or 7 years. We're just going to log in the text. If you have a code, that's often useful. Notice when I repeated the department name, I had to write it twice. We don't assume that it's repeated. So if you have accounting, accounts payable, then just accounting. The next one's accounting, accounts receivable. The accounting name has to be repeated as the record title names. So I'm going to close this, go back to Retention Manager. I'm going to open this up, and we're going to do our first import. Functions, administrator functions, import user records was a recently added function in the last year or so. I click on it, you get a screen like this. What we're going to do is match the order of the columns that we had in our spreadsheet. So the first field, if you recall, column A was code. Double click on that. We now have a link between column A and the code. The next one was department name 1. Then came department name 2. Oops, I made a mistake, but that's fine. You can double click and move it back out. So department name 2. And then the next one, column D, was subject 1. And again, you could have subject 2, 3, 4, 5. The next column was description. And the last column was the previous retention. Now you have to tell Retention Manager where the import file was. In this case, it expects it under a directory called data under your Retention Manager user data CO1 directory. But if it's not there, it will give you the opportunity to search in other directories for that information in Excel. Notice it's an XLS table. It's not the new Excel that has the new features. So when you save the Excel, save it as version 2003. I think they call it 97-2003. We click on it, and that is the file we're drawing from. We either have the option of adding to the records or replacing them. So replacing will delete what you had, adding will add on. I import it. Notice I got 4 records that were added. I cancel, open up user records, and notice I've now added on 4 rows of data, contracts, capital property, invoices. Notice the department names are there. And notice also our first line that had our labels that help us determine what each of those columns were is there. Of course, you don't want this in your project, and you can always right-click and delete it. And therefore, you can look at the information you have. We have the old retention periods notice permanent was the old retention period. And now we can start right-clicking and assigning either standard record series or records retention rules. So by importing, you have an opportunity to be able to do this in a very efficient manner. So in our slides, we have moved down and have already done the assignment of assigning standard record series and assigning retention rules. When we did our import, we were able to assign departments as part of our import. Let me go back to that one more time. And I want to change my preferences because I much prefer to assign standard record series than I do retention rules in my projects. But some of my legacy projects, I will assign retention rules. If I want to assign retention again to capital property, right-click, assign standard record series, go down in my standard record series. Either I could search or I could scan down until I came to a record series for capital property. Notice it has an active +6 retention. Double-click and do that assignment. I've placed this into the accounting department. That's what my spreadsheet said. To assign it to a department instead, or a different type of department, I would right-click, assign, and instead of standard record series, I would assign department. I now have a number of different departments here that I've created and I've played with in some of my other work. This one happens to be a label, but I have a department up here called accounting, accounts payable. Of course, you can add additional departments by using the right-click and copy, and I can make it property. This would be where we'd find accounting property records, and I would double-click. But I want to go back to the department screen one last time and show you one more thing. If we were to assign a department, our department screens are free-form. Therefore, you can make departments in a variety of different ways. The spreadsheet that I imported had accounting, accounts payable, legal, had departments set up that way. But instead, you can add departments to conform to your organizational structure. So if you have subsidiaries called SYZ Company or something like that, and they had an accounting department, for those who want to have separate departments by subsidiary, you can do it that way. Or for those who want to identify then separate your corporate departments, you can create a structure for departments, right-click, add new department, enter the data, and you can start a department structure by corporate or by the names of subsidiaries or divisions if record titles are located in those locations. If you now start assigning departments or you start assigning record series to your record titles and user records, you may end up signing the same one over and over. There's an undocumented trick that whatever assignment you last did, if you hit Control-R, you will repeat that assignment. My current department is accounting, accounts payable. If I go onto that record and hit Control-R, I will repeat what I just assigned, which would be a corporation again. And since I was pointing to corporate account, well, I should have written accounting, which is easily corrected. You can go ahead and do that more efficiently. Or, of course, you can select several items, several record titles, right-click, do an assignment of a department name. And by the way, we could edit and correct this and make it accounting instead. And you double-click and do the assignment, and several items got that assignment. One last point before I move on is every time you do an assignment, whether it's standard record series or department or retention rules or any other part of Retention Manager, please note the prompts in the status bar. When I started with user records. I right-clicked and assigned standard record series to my record title. The prompt says assign standard record series to user records. It's expecting an assignment right now. So if I double-click, the capital property record series would be assigned to contracts, which of course is incorrect, but we can do that one more time and instead find contract using our find button. We find it. There are a couple items that have the word contracts. We scan through, and then we find contracts and agreements under the legal function. Little reminder, our record series are not organized by department, even though the business function sounds like a department. They're actually business functions. So that wraps up what I wanted to talk about in user records, and I'm ready to go on to the next one.